The airplane hummed softly as it cruised through the skies, passengers settling into their seats with books, headphones, and quiet conversations. In row 10, a woman sat with her jacket folded beneath her head, her eyes closed in peaceful rest. She looked like any ordinary traveler, perhaps heading home or off to visit family. No one paid her much attention. She seemed calm, unassuming, and tired from the day. The flight had been smooth until suddenly a crackling voice came over the intercom. The captain's tone, usually warm and reassuring, now carried urgency. "Ladies and gentlemen, if there are any trained combat pilots on board, please make yourselves known immediately." The cabin filled with startled gasps. People looked around in confusion, their faces pale with fear. The woman in row 10 stirred at the announcement, blinking awake as if her instincts had caught the change in energy. Around her, passengers whispered nervously. A child clung to his mother. A businessman removed his headphones and looked toward the cockpit with concern. The flight attendants hurried up and down the aisle, their smiles forced, their eyes betraying their anxiety. The captain repeated the plea, his voice tighter this time. "This is not a drill. If there is anyone with military flight experience, we need you." The passengers' minds raced, imagining what kind of emergency could force such a request. Some prayed silently, others simply froze. Meanwhile, the woman in row 10 sat up straighter, her face no longer tired but sharp with focus. She was no ordinary passenger. Years earlier, she had been a combat pilot, trained to fly under pressure, skilled in decision-making when life and death hung in the balance. She had left that chapter of her life behind, moving into a quieter existence far away from the chaos of war. Yet the discipline, the training, the courage, it all still lived within her. Now, as the captain's desperate call echoed through the cabin, she felt those instincts awaken. Passengers stared at her as she calmly unbuckled her seatbelt and stood. She said nothing grand, made no dramatic gesture, but her steady presence spoke louder than words. The flight attendant's eyes widened in relief as she approached, quickly guiding her toward the cockpit. The whispers swelled, and hope returned to the faces of those who moments ago were drowning in fear. Inside the cockpit, the situation was dire. One of the pilots had collapsed, unable to continue. The remaining captain needed assistance to handle the aircraft safely. Sweat lined his brow as he explained, "We're dealing with multiple malfunctions and turbulence ahead. I can't manage this alone." The woman nodded calmly, her training sliding back into place like a familiar glove. She took the co-pilot's seat, strapping herself in with practiced precision. Her hands danced over the controls with steady confidence, and her eyes scanned the instruments, absorbing every detail. For the captain, it felt as though a guardian angel had walked in at the very moment he needed one most. He didn't ask for her resume. Her presence made it clear she belonged there. Meanwhile, the passengers had no details of what was happening behind the closed cockpit door. But the announcement came. "We are in safe hands. Please remain calm." Relief washed over the cabin, though fear still lingered beneath the surface. Mothers held their children tighter, and strangers offered quiet reassurances to one another. In row 10, the empty seat where the woman had been sitting became a symbol of hope. Passengers whispered. She went to help. For them, she was no longer a stranger, but the lifeline between panic and survival. Their faith in her, though based on nothing more than instinct and trust, grew stronger with each passing moment. The flight grew tense as turbulence rattled the plane. Drinks spilled, bags shifted in the overhead compartments, and nervous cries rose with each bump. But inside the cockpit, calm reigned. The woman's steady voice guided the captain through procedures, her hands adjusting controls as if she had never left the skies. Years of training in combat had taught her that panic only fueled disaster. Composure, even in chaos, was the weapon of survival. The captain marveled at how quickly she adapted, her instincts sharp and precise. Together they wrestled with the storm and the failing systems. Working in perfect rhythm, two pilots bound not by history, but by necessity. As the aircraft descended toward safety, the ground controllers communicated frantically, giving instructions. But it was the woman's voice that assured them, "This is under control." She guided the plane through rough winds, aligning it with the runway as the storm raged around them. Every passenger inside held their breath, hands clenched tightly, eyes squeezed shut. The descent felt endless. But at last, the wheels kissed the ground with a rough but steady landing. Gasps filled the cabin, followed by cries of joy, applause, and tears. Against all odds, they were safe. The woman in row 10 had saved them all. When the doors opened, emergency personnel rushed aboard, prepared for disaster. Instead, they found relief in the faces of the passengers. The captain emerged, pale but grateful, followed by the woman who had stood from row 10 when no one else could. She did not bask in applause, though the passengers clapped and cheered for her. She simply gave a small nod, her expression calm, almost humble. For her, it was not about recognition but duty, an unspoken bond between her training and the lives she had saved. She slipped quietly back into the crowd, preferring anonymity over spotlight. Some passengers tried to speak to her, to thank her, but she offered only a smile. One mother whispered, "You're an angel." A businessman said, "You've given me faith in people again." She accepted their words graciously, but never sought to prolong the moment. In her mind, she had done what needed to be done, nothing more. But for the passengers, she became a living legend, a story they would tell for the rest of their lives. "We were saved because of the woman in row 10, they would say, their voices filled with awe. As the crowd dispersed and the woman disappeared into the night, the story lingered in every heart that had been on that flight. It was a reminder that greatness often hides in ordinary places, and heroes do not always arrive wearing uniforms or capes. Sometimes they sit quietly, unnoticed, until the world calls them forth. The woman in row 10 carried no desire for fame, but her courage became an unshakable tale of hope, humility, and strength. Outro. This was a story from African Folktales. Remember, heroes may be sitting quietly beside us, waiting for the moment to rise. Stay tuned for more stories of courage, wisdom, and life's unexpected lessons.